In the past 6 months, we've sold about 1.7 million out of our 8 million shares that we held.
First of all, billionaires have access to a lot more information than the average investor. If they're interested in self-driving cars, they can go hire a bunch of academics to figure out if it's even possible and pay them $1 million just for his own personal informational use. So billionaires do make a difference. They can do a lot more work. So when they begin to sell, you do have to look at why they're selling, because they do have a lot more information than the average investor, even most significant institutional investors. So it's an important point.
I think the headline here is that you sold some of the stock. That probably comes as a surprise to many people, especially if you think the stock is still going to continue to rise from here. Why'd you sell it?
Because it was up 20 times.
A lot of investors, and Ron Barron and Tesla is a great example of this, they buy entire sectors. They buy big ideas. They don't just buy a stock because they like the management team. They get involved in a whole sector. So they'll own Tesla, they'll own NIO, they'll own the LiDAR companies, they'll own everything up and down the technology stack because they so fundamentally believe this is the way of the future and they want to be involved. So think about when Tesla was running $800, almost $900 a share just a few weeks ago, really. From that level, $2,000, which I think he said was going to be over 10 years, is really only a 7% rate of return. An asset doubles in 10 years, it takes about a 7% return to get there. So it wasn't that impressive a number. Now, obviously, with the stock falling, that rate of return is going to be a lot higher. But it's always important when you hear somebody talk about, oh, the thing is going to be X dollars in 10 years. Go do the math and figure out what it would take to actually create that kind of rate of return, because it's not always that impressive. There was an old joke when I was in business school. What's the difference between a good company and a good stock? And the answer is always valuation. You could have an awesome company and buy the stock at the wrong price and not make money, even though that was a very well-run, excellent company. Billionaires know that. Every good investor knows that. And they know that it's not money until you sell. And so at some point, everything is a sale. And that's sometimes a hard thing for investors to understand, smaller investors to understand. But it could also be, with some of these sales that these investors are thinking, you know what, I've had an awesome run. I've made a lot of money in these names. And perhaps there's more attractive names out there for me to own right now. But it isn't just what you're selling. It's also what you're going to buy next that a lot of really successful investors think about. And if they think they've got a better opportunity going forward in another group, they're going to sell some of the things that have worked. Really, really wealthy investors don't worry as much about cyclicality, I think, as most investors do. They don't worry about where we are in the economic cycle. They tend to look for names that'll work no matter what. It's kind of a hallmark of what they do. You rarely hear Warren Buffett talking about, oh, is the Fed going to raise rates or lower rates? He's just looking to buy excellent companies. And so I don't think they worry about it as much as most because they can afford to have very long time horizons. But for individual investors, you do want to think about it. You do want to think about, okay, what do stocks do when rates go up? Most investors haven't seen a long rate up cycle. So you want to go back and do your history, look at your history and read about that, because stocks do struggle when rates go up quickly, as we're seeing today. So in that one way, you might want to totally not emulate a billionaire. You might want to do some of your own work because your horizon might be different from theirs. And in that case, you might not want to take on as much risk. You might want to look at cyclical names because even though they're not great companies, they could be great investments.